Welcome to the COSB 360 Conversations videocast, the platform for county influencers. This is an organizational and talent development initiative to engage with our leaders and keep our workforce informed. This is also one way to share the efforts of departmental staff in what it takes from a leadership perspective to keep the wheels turning in our organization. This videocast is being hosted by J.O.I.N OTD Division Chief.
Let's talk about some of the initiatives and sessions that you are launching across the county. Talk to us about J.O.I.N and some other things that we need to look forward to and that we want the county audience to be aware of.
Of course. So in December of last year, there was a framework, it's a race, equity, and inclusion framework called J.O.I.N that was launched. And what that means is there's a 2-year plan where our leaders, directors, and assistant directors get to be part of a leadership learning labs. And we're calling them that because it's just, again, I'm choosing not to use training in that specific way. We just come and we talk about different things from the roots of social justice, learning how to be more, this called strategic questioning. So it's more about being more strategic about asking questions. We had an assessment of the organization done at the director level. And then now we're going to continue to do a few more sessions until end of 2022.
Okay.
And so it starts at the leaders. There also had a concept of brave spaces for our managers, and in the brave space, they kind of received the same information about the roots of social justice. The idea, and this was J.O.I.N, and so the idea was, I was going to start implementing some of the sessions later on to include managers, and I just kept getting a few emails, and so I went ahead and I had some curriculum. I had a curriculum already created, and now we have had a couple of sessions. There's 2 more, and so the first one that we talk about is the impact of unconscious bias. We have to understand what that is, and in order for us to understand that, we have to understand what unconscious bias is and how our brain works. And
Right.
We had our first session, and one of the things that I tell the groups is I'm always learning. I'm learning through the sessions, and so through that session, I learned that we needed to create a second session on unconscious bias because there's different types of biases, right, that are associated. The halo biases, the horn bias, the affirmation bias. I mean, I can go. And so some employees were, well, I can I see the slides because I want to go back to see all the other types of bias. And then I thought, it'll be great if I do an entire follow-up class on just all of the different versions of it. And we do provide the ability to go into break rooms and talk about what is being learned. Through each of the sessions, there's a few things that are repeated throughout all of them. And that is either key terminology, is introduction to the terminology, right? Because not a lot of people are familiar with the terminology. And so you kind of have to feed it at the proper time so that, again, getting the mind to be able to know, so that they follow the concepts. If I start talking to you about, I'm a photographer too, right? So if I start talking to you about photography and all the deep concepts of photography, I'm going to lose you.
You lose me. Yeah, definitely.
And so the idea is, I don't know where everybody is at. So I want to, I want us to be exposed to the data slowly but surely, repetitiveness, so that we can come back, and always promoting discussion, always promoting talking, obviously with respect.
So tell me this. So hold on there. So tell me this though. You have some classes that you're doing now, and you also have some classes that we're offering in the OTD catalog. So what's the difference between those two? Is there a difference?
Well, they're the same. Originally, when we were talking, we wanted to get in the catalog, and the idea was, let's get people out there to start taking the sessions. Something that I did that I thought worked really well was I just had all the emails for all the managers, and I emailed them and said, we're having this session on this day. And on the first session, we had 128 managers.
That's awesome.
That is a lot, and I think it was like a 3-week notice. On the second session, we had 78. The third session is taking place next week, but that is, I only invited those who could not attend. So they have the ability to accept or not accept. What I'm hoping to do is that we provide those sessions in more than one occurrence so that they have the ability to attend.
And unfortunately, I've been invited, and I'm gonna be out of town. So
It's okay.
I hope that you have another session where
Yeah,
I
we
can
will.
attend.
We will. Ideally, you wanna be able to go through that proper sequence. But you know what, June, again, like I said, we're always learning. Originally, I had suggested that we do the last class. That I had suggested to do first the class that I now think should be the last class. So it's
Okay.
a learning, and so kind of here's the progression of how I have it in my mind. Okay, because some of it I have, again, there's just so much, and you're like, okay, you want to feed what the employees want to know, and so the going through this unconscious bias training is just really very matter of fact. Some of the things, how early do we start developing it, how our brain works, terminology, some images. We talk a little bit about microaggressions. Again, that is something that most of us know if we are in the industry, but most people have not heard about it or don't have the depth. And so you start doing the introductions. The second session, it's a little bit more, it's a little bit more rich, and it's exploring the concepts and roots of racism, right? So that is interesting because, I always want to make sure that I set everybody in the right path and make sure that they're centered, because the word racism or race usually carries a heavy emotion.
Yeah.
Right. And so the way that I thought it would be good to introduce it is finding out, okay, when was the term race first used? So we go through the history of where that happened and how it evolved from its original meaning to what we know it now, and how that's impacted different groups. And the one thing that we say, and I learned this from a session that I attended, is nobody in the group is responsible for any of this, right? Because we didn't write the laws. We were not part of a lot of the things that
we weren't here at the time.
Correct. So, right, correct. And I think a lot of the times that feeling may come. I personally have never felt it, but I thought it would be good to be able to make sure that that's thrown out there, to make sure that we can help people just really open up a little bit and be ready to hear a little bit more. And so we just literally, as a matter of fact.
And you're right, and I'm going to acknowledge that, right? Because for some people, there are individuals felt, well, okay, I'm listening to this, but I had no role in this, and that is in itself is true. But I think sometimes as well, it's about how we present things as well. And it depends also in terms of what's going on with us, in terms of how we react or respond to it. There have been times when I say this to myself, where when it comes to race or racism, where I can just really have a very professional, somewhat objective discussion about it. And then there are times, depending on what's going on with me and the way the individual that I'm talking to, or their choice of words will cause me to do, it's like I may be sitting upright and then all of a sudden I'm like, and then it's different. So, we have to just acknowledge that dynamic does exist, but even in that discomfort, we need to maintain an open mind just to hear and see what's going on, because each of us, our journeys are different in that.
Yeah, that goes back to what I said earlier about contribution into something, right? So if you and I get into an argument, my contribution is something, it could be as low as 1%, as much as 99%, right? And I think that a lot of what you were saying is just, how that's being said, how it's being viewed. And one of the concepts that I do talk into this, the influence of unconscious bias, is the official title of the session, is about the difference between being called in or being called out, right? Because you can come and say, Henry, I feel, okay, so let me just role play here. You can come and say, Henry, I think that comment is racist, right? And to me, I can say, okay, do I want to get into this conversation? And most likely will be no, right? Because I mean, I'm already feeling attacked or whatever the case may be. A lot of it is really ignorance, not always, but sometimes it's ignorance. It's really lack of knowledge and or understanding. And so, so the question is, well, how do you do that? Right. And so instead of calling me out on the fact that you think that my behavior is X, Y, or Z, whatever the case would be, you do a call in. In other words, you want to call into the conversation and say, have you thought about how other people may feel about that comment? Well, no, what do you mean? Right. And you start, now we're talking. And then eventually it'll prepare me to be able to hear, I felt that when you said that, I took it as, right?
Good example. That's a great example, Henry. Being called out versus being called in. That's really is a good example.
And that's what we want to, but it takes practice. I mean, again, the way that we usually have triggers, we don't know these triggers. And I think that I need to go to our Be Well department to tap into this a little bit more, which the big vision that I have is, tapping into the expertise of all of our, departments. That's the way I see it eventually as this progresses, right? And so, again,
can I tell you, hold on, I gotta tell you something.
Yeah.
The word trigger is starting to trigger me. like, and I say that because the, not your use of it, but it's being used so much that I'm like, oh, can we find another word? Can we just find another? No, and not, no. And not even as it relates to diversity and inclusion. I'm talking about just overall when we talk about mental health, when we just overall. So I'm hearing that word so much that I'm starting to just like, okay, I don't want to hear that. Not that one word.
You know what's funny is I just started using it. Because I'm hearing it a lot from other people.
Yeah, we're hearing it a lot.
Point. Again, it's all about perspectives, right? It's all about what you have done. And I think that, one thing that I did, and I had this at the session yesterday, I don't know if you noticed it, but when people provide feedback about what is being presented, I do like to engage in dialogue because I don't assume that what I put up there is the best choice of words. And so we get the dialogue going, and then I take it into consideration and I go back and say, okay, can I do I feel like this is the best way it could have been worded? Let me revert back. And so I do make changes based on some of those discussions.
And you know what? And let me interject there as well, as we're getting ready to wrap this up. One of the things that I think that's important, even for us as trainers and just overall, is looking for trends, right? So say, for instance, I just made that comment, but I made it, it's real for me. But for me, it's just part of this discussion and this banter, that dialogue that we're having back and forth, right? And it's not necessarily just in this context of diversity, inclusion, or anything like that. And so I think sometimes even when we hear things, once we get the feedback, we also need to look for trends. So how many other people are you saying that that's an issue for them? Because sometimes it's almost in the world of academia, as I am doing my dissertation. Typically, you have to cite at least 2 or 3 sources, and they want the original sources, right? And there's a reason for that, because just because one person says something doesn't mean that I really need to turn the world upside down for that. I validate it, I acknowledge it, and I need to navigate it. But when we start seeing trends when it comes to feedback from our programs, then we really need to wait a second. I have several individuals, 3 individuals, 4 individuals. Then we really need to start looking at things. So I think we have to just balance that as well, because just as we just said, there's so many different perspectives,
Well, 2 things, and I think that's connected. The first one is, no, nobody, you're the first one. Yay. But here's the follow-up question that I would have to that is, how many people have not said it, right? Because you and I feel comfortable. We can have these conversations all day, I think, right? But here's something that I wanted to transition here and to bring into this point is, people don't say their opinion or ask questions because they're afraid of saying the wrong thing. You know what I mean? They're afraid of looking or appearing a certain way, or it may not be the popular belief, or it may not be that. The reality is you have to be able to process that. And so what I tell people is, look, I can have almost any conversation. I haven't had topics where I say, no, I cannot talk about that. I just, for some reason, I have that ability, unless, you know, you have to go and it's personal, you have to go do your own healing and redirecting, right? Whatever the case would be. But the reality is not everybody feels as comfortable as you just did, to say, you know, that word trigger, the word triggers triggering me now, you know, you and I can have that. And so the idea would be to be able to equip each other to have the conversations. We're not having them, and that's why there's assumptions being made, right? You could have easily not said anything and then all of a sudden impact you. And then now you're taking it in. And so now it's affecting you. I would have not known. How do you not tell me? But because it's so new to me, you know, I thought, okay, you know, yeah, let's use that. And I didn't think about that until now that you brought it. I'm like, that's right. You know, I do have people in my life that have struggled with mental health. And they do say that word. And so a very good point, June.
Yeah, I'm so, you know, you're reading a lot. I'm reading a lot. I'm taking in a lot of information. I am reading this awesome book called Lost Connections. Another doctor from CSUN mentioned it to me. And it's about mental health, and it's about the pharmaceutical companies and the drugs, medications, and just different perspectives out there. And it has shifted. The first 46 pages have really impacted my perspective. Okay. And so, yeah, I'll send it to you. So I'm just, for some reason, the topic of mental health is really at the forefront of my mind right now, in the midst of everything, because I know people who are being, I think, closely, who are being impacted by it. So it's for that reason. But yeah, I'm just taking in everything. So when that comes from so many different places, I'm like, I'm hearing this word more and more and more. And so yeah, that's why I made that statement, because it's coming from so many sources.
You know, mental health, wellness, overall wellness, I think we don't give it and I say we, I'm putting myself there. We put ourselves last a lot of the times. You know what
we do.
And before we know it, somebody told me this a long time ago. She said, your brain is so powerful that it tells you that you're okay until your body tells you it's not. Right. And as I'm sure we know, and we can have people from Be Well talk about this, at one point we do have a physical reaction to some of that stress that we're dealing with. Mm-hmm. What I would like to encourage us all is just to be more compassionate with each other, to be more understanding that there are a lot of other barriers and factors that get us to that point. The fact that some of the frustrations that are being seen may not necessarily be done by us directly, but rather by history of events that have happened. And it's just really being able to be open to hearing other perspectives. And I go back to the square, is we're all in the same spot, but we just have different perspectives of it. And understanding and knowing that will allow us to be able to coexist. You know, I heard I heard a video on an island called Mauritius. I used to actually do a training on that. And I forgot a lot of the factors, but the thing that I don't forget is they said is that they felt like they were a fruit salad. They said, we are a fruit salad, because even though it's a number of different fruits, they don't all blend in. Every fruit has its own taste. The citrus remains citrusy, the other, you know. And so I thought, you know, that is a cool analogy. Who doesn't love a fruit salad? I mean,
I love a fruit salad. Yeah.
But they're all mixed in together. They all come from different families, or the fruit families, right? But they're, you know, it provide that different experience when you're having it. And I think that if we see life as a fruit salad, that we're all different, but we all can be in the same bowl and enhance the experience, you know?
And I like that. And that really is a good way for us to wrap up the session, Henry. I like the idea of the fruit salad. And so one of the things that I want to invite everyone to do is to come to some of these sessions and Brave Space discussions that Henry will be having. We have sessions in the OTD catalog. You will be receiving invites from him as well regarding upcoming topics, so that we can explore ways that we can be that fruit salad, that unique, because we, each of us are so unique and individual, how we can contribute to the whole and still maintain our own unique, distinctive flavor. I like
Yes.
that. You got something there, Henry. You should do it. You should do a title around that, and
Yeah,
then and have a design. I think you got something
I
there.
need to learn that because I'm not as technical as Diana is. So
Yeah, yeah. Well, we're not all just supposed to be expert designers, but we all have just a little bitty flavor.
yeah, yeah.
Henry, thank you so much for joining us today. We talked about, just in terms of the entire session, diversity, inclusion, EEO, the aspect of leadership as it relates, and some leadership greats as it relates to the diversity and the social injustice issues. It's a journey. It's a
Yes.
journey, right? And then just some of the initiatives and opportunities that we have throughout the county. And so hopefully we'll have you back again sometime in the future
Yeah.
to just give us an update on how we're progressing. But thank you so much for joining us. And hey, have an awesome day and be the best part of the fruit salad you can be today.
Yeah. Never gonna forget that.